Hello guys, welcome. This is a very special session where I have taken authors and works names from PYQs. A lot of authors and works I have taken from the previous year questions, and we will just look at them now. You know, answer key has come. Many of you did very well. Some of you need to write again. So before you prepare for the next session or next net, it is very important that we know which authors and works to prepare. That is why I am going to teach you or talk to you about a lot of authors and works that they have been asking about in the previous net and set exams. Okay, so are you ready, guys? Ta-da-dang! Welcome to this session. First, we will talk about Orhan Pamuk. You know that he is not a new writer. All of you know that Orhan Pamuk is a very famous author and Nobel laureate. Orhan Pamuk is from Turkey. He is a Turkish novelist who has written very famous books that I'm sure you know about. Can you name some of them? His very famous books, My Name is Red, Snow, The Museum of Innocence, है ना? My Name is Red, Snow, The Black Book, The Museum of Innocence, all very famous. In the exam, they asked about this book, The Naive and Sentimental Novelist. My Name is Red, Snow, The Museum of Innocence, The Black Book. These are all novels. He has written Istanbul memoirs. Also, he wrote The Naive and Sentimental Novelist. What is The Naive and Sentimental Novelist about? It is a non-fiction work by Orhan Pamuk. Will you remember? It is a non-fiction work by Orhan Pamuk. It's a personal book about reading and writing novels. How to read novels, how to write novels. And he is revealing the intimate connections in the worlds of the writer and the reader. Guys, I am talking about books and authors, very major and new books and authors that are asked about in net. In the previous years, in the PYQs, there has been a lot of questions based on these writers. That is what we are talking about. Okay? Are you enjoying this? We talked about Orhan Pamuk, Nobel laureate. So, the naive and sentimental novelist is over. Do you want me to type the names of the other novels that I mentioned? Author of My Name is Red, The Black Book, Snow, The Museum of Innocence. Will you remember, guys? Okay. So this is an author they have asked about in previous years. Okay, next one. Have you heard of Roger Paulin? Roger Paulin wrote The Brief Compass. Roger Paulin wrote The Brief Compass. It is not a fiction work. The Brief Compass is a book of non-fiction. And it relates to the traditions from which the novel sprang. Novel means novella. The novella. It is a book about the genre of novella. Will you remember? It relates to the traditions from which the novel sprang. Look at the title, The Brief Compass, the 19th century German novel. Examples of the genre written outside Germany, such as the novellas of Edgar Allan Poe, Turgenev, etc. are discussed. Oh, Navneet. No problem, Navneet. You study like this, you will get much more, double that mark next time. The wider context of German literature in the 19th century is also discussed. This is a book they have asked about in NET previously. Previously in NET they asked about Roger Paulin, who wrote the book The Brief Compass. Why are they asking these books? Because they are prescribed in some central universities, etc. Did you understand, guys? Milan Kundera, very famous writer. Milan Kundera, everybody should know, is a Czech writer. Milan Kundera has written various novels, the most famous being The Joke. Milan Kundera's most famous novel is The Joke. I will write that here, okay? Author of The Joke, the book of Laughter and Forgetting. Will you remember? The Unbearable Lightness of Being. Guys, you have to study everything very, very thoroughly. Only then you will pass NET. By some shortcut, by studying something here and there, by following people who teach you shortcuts, you cannot pass NET. You have to be really serious. Will you remember? Will you do that? Then you will definitely pass. You have to study all the important works in great detail. Okay? You have to immortality also. You have to study all the major authors and works in some detail. By studying something here and there, it will be very difficult to pass. Clear, guys? So don't worry. If you are following my method and studying all this, you will definitely pass. Did you understand? Don't worry at all. There are lots of books that they will ask you from. You have to study a lot of them in detail, authors and works, everything. If you join our Unacademy course, you will get like 70% of what you need. Otherwise, you can follow all the tips that I am giving you. They asked in NET about Testaments Betrayed. Testaments Betrayed is non-fiction. It traces the evolution of the novel from Rabelais to Kafka. Rabelais to Kafka. It is Navneet. If you follow me, I am confident that I will teach you all the main things. You have to follow me everywhere. But following me alone is not enough. You have to study. You have to sit down and really, really study. If you just attend my lectures and think you have studied, that is not enough. You have to really sit and study, following everything that I am teaching you. Then, that is why a lot of my students also got very high marks. In every exam, so many students got high marks, many get JRF. Why? Because they studied. So, if you study, I will give you the guidance. The guidance is not only enough. You have to study. Remember that. Okay. So, Milan Kundera's non-fiction work they asked about, Testaments Betrayed. It is about the evolution of the novel, drawing parallels between literature and music. Okay? Will you remember? Next is a very important American postmodern writer, Donald Barthelme. Donald Barthelme is an American short story writer and novelist. Okay, Shabana, I will tell you about Rabelais. Rabelais was a French medieval writer who employed Menippean satire in his writings. His most famous book is Gargantua and Pantagruel. Here, he is talking about two giants and how these giants are rejecting all the status quo or established conventions. And Bakhtin has talked about Rabelais' playful satire as an example of carnivalesque in fiction that goes against mainstream values. Did you understand? Now, Donald Barthelme is a writer of short stories in America. Donald Barthelme wrote very short stories. His stories are called short fiction or flash fiction. Author of short fiction or flash fiction. So short. And you know what he did? He took he took images and heroes from popular culture like Snow White, Batman, and he wrote about them. He took images and heroes from popular culture and wrote about them. Snow White is a postmodernist novel that inverts the fairy tale of the same name. It is a countercultural, experimental reconstruction of the Disney version of the traditional fairy tale. It is a subversion of the fairy tale. Did you understand? Snow White by Donald Barthelme. Will you remember? He is a very important postmodern writer. Very important postmodern writer. Snow White, I think, is his most famous book. And it is very early also, at the beginning of postmodernism. It came in 1967. Will you remember, guys? This is prescribed in universities. Many of these are prescribed in universities. Then Jamaica Kincaid is an Antiguan American writer who has written novels as well as a small plays, that is non-fiction. Jamaica Kincaid is the author of many fiction works also, autobiographical fiction she has written. What are the names of her autobiographical works? She has written Annie John, I will type here, author of Annie John, Lucy, and the autobiography of my mother. I have talked about all these books 1,000 times in this last year. Okay, Annie John, Lucy, and the autobiography of my mother. A small plays is creative non-fiction. A small plays is creative non-fiction. It's a book-length essay drawing upon Kincaid's experiences in Antigua. Kincaid was growing up in Antigua. It's a book-length essay. Jamaica Kincaid in a small plays criticizes the Antiguan government. She criticizes the Antiguan government, the tourist industry, and British colonial legacy of Antigua. All these are happening in a small place by Jamaica Kincaid. Antiguan American writer, very famous are Annie John, Lucy, and autobiography of my mother. Alright guys, did you like the session? Next writer, ta-da-dang! Okay, so let us talk about Howard Jacobsen. Howard Jacobsen is a British Jewish novelist. British Jewish novelist known for his comic novels. Will you remember? Very famous is the Booker Prize winner, The Finkler Question. They asked in net about J, his novel. G is by John Berger, V is by Thomas Pynchon, J is by Howard Jacobsen. J, what is J? A speculative fiction novel with a post-apocalyptic setting and tells the story of the romance between the two protagonists. J is a speculative fiction novel. Speculative fiction, remember? We talked about it in genres lecture. I gave a lecture on genres. And it is a story of the romance between the two protagonists. Post-apocalyptic novel it is. J. G is by John Berger. V is by Thomas Pynchon. है ना? All his books are Jewish novels. Comic Jewish novels. Next we have Peter Aykroyd. Peter Aykroyd. Some of them are hiding behind me. I will just lift them up like this. Peter Aykroyd is an English biographer, novelist and critic. Will you remember, guys? Peter Aykroyd is a biographer and also novelist and critic. His famous books are novels. He has written very famous novels. He has written. What are they? Yes, he has written many works based on other writers, intertextual works. The Great Fire of London is based on Little Dorrit. Henna? Then he has written The Last Testament of Oscar Wilde, based on Oscar Wilde's fictitious diary. Then Hawksmoor is there. Chatterton is based on our Chatterton. He has written a retelling of Canterbury Tales. He has also written London, a biography. You won't believe this. They asked about his escape from the earth. Escape from the earth explains the era of space travel. Explains the era of space travel in this epic 10-volume history of the world for children. Escape from the earth is a 10-volume history of the world where he talks about space travel. The English Ghost. Hooray! It is a fascinating collection of first-hand and contemporary accounts of British ghosts and hauntings. He has written about a lot of authors and cities. A lot of authors and cities, and also history of England in different forms. Will you remember, guys? Such a famous writer, important writer. So many books he has written. Alright. Ta-da-dang. Paul Oster. Ta-da-dang. He is a postmodern novelist. Paul Oster is an American postmodern novelist. Did you like the video, guys? Thank you for joining us. He wrote the New York trilogy. New York trilogy. Do you know they asked about all 3 books in the New York trilogy in net? In net they asked about all 3 books. He wrote New York trilogy. What is it? It is a postmodern interpretation of detective and mystery fiction. Yes, Lakshya, not only Shakespeare, he has written about Thomas More, Dickens, so many writers. Who? Peter Aykroyd. Okay, this is Paul Oster, who wrote New York Trilogy, a postmodern interpretation of detective and mystery fiction, exploring various philosophical themes. Will you remember, guys? City of Glass, Ghosts, The Locked Room. These are 3 parts of New York Trilogy. The Book of Illusions he wrote. Paul Oster wrote The Book of Illusions. What is it about? It is set in the 1980s. Okay, guys? The Book of Illusions by Paul Oster, set in the 1980s. A depressed man is getting obsessed with the silent comedies of an actor called Hector Mann. And this Hector Mann was missing for a long time. That is the story of the Book of Illusions. Alright? The Book of Illusions. Then there is Winter Journal. Winter Journal, a highly personal meditation on the body, time and language itself. Lakshya, if you found Shakespeare a biography interesting, you should also read Bill Bryson's Shakespeare. It is very, very interesting. Okay, guys? So, Paul Oster, please look up. New York Trilogy, which contains City of Glass, then Ghosts, The Locked Room. City of Glass came, you know, in which year? 1985. Ghosts came in 1986. And The Locked Room also in 1986. Hooray! He was writing 2 novels at the same time, eh? Alright. Will you remember these authors? You want to look at Paul Oster properly? Ta-da-dang! Dekho. Now, ready for the next? Harish Trivedi, who wrote Colonial Transactions. Harish Trivedi wrote Colonial Transactions. Did Paul Oster write Hamlet? Oh. नहीं तो that is Maggie O'Farrell. Hamlet is Maggie O'Farrell. Okay. Harish Trivedi, Colonial Transactions. It is not a fictional work. Of course, he was a professor at Delhi. It is a non-fiction work exploring the interrelationship between English literature and India. English literature and India. Colonial transactions. And then Mary Renault. She wrote Funeral Games. Did you know, guys? It is part of Alexander trilogy. Mary Renault's Funeral Games is part of Alexander trilogy. A novel that deals with the death of Alexander the Great and its aftermath. She talks about the gradual disintegration of Alexander's empire. See, what are the books in Alexander trilogy? It's about Alexander the Great. Fire from Heaven, The Persian Boy, and Funeral Games. Fire from Heaven, The Persian Boy, and Funeral Games. Okay. Next. Mary Renault. All her novels are historical novels. Okay, remember that. All her novels are historical novels. I am talking about books and authors they have asked in recent times in net. Okay, tomorrow I will do an analysis of the answer key and question paper. Alright, this is Mary Renault, Funeral Games. It's from a PYQ. Joyce Carey, do you know? Joyce Carey was an Anglo-Irish novelist and colonial officer. He wrote The Horse's Mouth. It is part of his trilogy. The Horse's Mouth. Herself Surprised to be a Pilgrim. These are other novels of this trilogy. Herself Surprised to be a Pilgrim. What is Horse's Mouth about? He also wrote Mr. Johnson. Joyce Carey also wrote Mr. Johnson. That also they have asked before. I remember. Mr. Johnson also they have asked. Horse's Mouth is about the adventures of Gully Gimson, an artist who would exploit his friends and acquaintances to get money. In order to make money, he is exploiting his friends and acquaintances. That is the story of The Horse's Mouth. Will you remember, guys? Haha, Lakshya. Anglo-Irish novelist. Told from this man's point of view, Gully Gimson. Joyce Carey is a colonial writer. Colonial writer it is. Identity, colonial themes are there. Baljinder K. Mahal has written The Queen's English, How to Speak Pakka. What is Baljinder Mahal? Baljinder Mahal saying here, dekho. Baljinder Mahal is saying, more people speak English in South Asia than in Britain and North America combined. Okay? More people speak English in South Asia than in Britain and North America combined, with India alone having 350 million English speakers. Baljinder Mahal says, This means that English, which is the modern blend of standard English, Indian English, and South Asian languages, could soon become the most widely spoken form of English on earth. That is the thesis in the Queen's English, How to Speak Pakka, by Baljinder Mahal. Did you like that? These questions they've asked in net before. They have asked about these books in net before. That is why we are talking about them today. ठीक है? Komal, you have to study everything from the beginning. All I can say is join my course or follow me in YouTube. Because there also I am doing free courses. If you want a paid course, you can join Unacademy. And in Unacademy, I have completed a course. One complete course is already done. You can join Unacademy and do it. Okay? That is what you can do. Alright. Did you like this Queen's English and its thesis? That English is going to be the most popular form of English in the world. Samajh rahe ho? That is it. Okay. Ready for the next? Did you enjoy so far, guys? Did you like the video? Will you please like the video? You can also please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Ye bolo, tomorrow I will do analysis of answer key, okay? I will tell you how to study. I will tell you more. I will tell you how to remember. Will you join me? Google search karo and join karo. I'll do that in my YouTube channel. But here in Unacademy, I will do theoretical terms tomorrow. Okay. Thank you, Carol sir. These are all authors they have been asking about in net. Very, very important. The Queen's English we were talking about. Shall I type the... What is the year of Queen's English? वो भी important रहेगा ना. Queen's English. At first when I heard the name, I thought it must be some book about English, study of English language. But ये तो half मजाक में है, I think. Humor it is. It is a humorous book. It is not an academic book. 2006 था ये. ठीक है? 2006. All right. Verrier Elvin. Verrier Elvin has written a book about India, Christ and Satyagraha. Did you know, guys, Verrier Elvin was a British-born Indian anthropologist. British-born Indian anthropologist. He has written many works. He was a tribal activist. He wrote the Baiga, the Muria and their Ghotul. 1930 का है ये. Christ and Satyagraha is from 1930. Did you know, guys, he came to India, joined a small sect of Indians called the Krista Seva Sangh of Pune. Yes, Nobel. And he hoped to indigenize Christianity. He wanted an Indian version of Christianity. Will you remember that? He got our Padma Bhushan also, as well as Nobel Prize. He worked in the realm of religion mostly. Nobel nahi, Padma Bhushan, because he's Nobel nahi tha, Padma Bhushan. And he was very famous in our Nehru's time. I've heard a lot about him in my childhood also, because that famous he was in newspapers and all that. Tribal activist he was, that is why. Tribal activist. And then he was interested in Buddhism. He was interested in Indian religions. And he has written a lot of works also. Okay, we have studied about him. Sometimes we study about him in school also. In school. Everybody must have heard of his name. Verrier Elvin. Now, shall I move on? Anais Nin. Anais Nin is very famous because of so many quotable quotes. You know, everywhere in Facebook and all, you can see Anais Nin quotes. She was a very famous writer, American, Cuban, French writer, diarist, essayist, and novelist. Anais Nin is famous for her quotations. She said, for example, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are, she said. Anais Nin said, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. That means our perceptions color our ideas. Our experiences color our ideas. She said, the only abnormality is the incapacity to love. The only abnormality is the incapacity to love, she said. Then she said, I postpone death by living. Yes, Komal, you can. I postpone death by living, by suffering, by error. Wow. People living deeply have no fear of death. Dreams are necessary to life. She said that. So many quotes are there. So many. Hundreds of sentences are there that are quoted from Anais Nin. Will you remember, guys? Now, Delta of Venus. It is a collection of short stories by Anais Nin. Anais Nin has written Delta of Venus. It's a collection of 15 short stories. Will you remember? I think that is her very famous book. Delta of Venus is her most famous book. Okay. And I'm just checking out what are her other works. Diaries only mostly. Diary of Anais Nin, very famous. She has written Henry and June, many journals and diaries. Okay. House of Incest, Winter of Artifice. These are novels by Anais Nin. Cut off मैं कैसे बता सकती हूँ शुभांगी? I can't. I don't want to just say something wrongly. Let them announce. Wait till then. Don't get it because it is humanly not possible to predict it. Whatever people are predicting is wrong. It is not even percentage, it is percentile. So it is just a statistical calculation. If you can wait for years like this for net to happen, then you can wait for the cutoff to be announced. I don't want to take part in any speculation. Alright, so did you like Anais Nin? Will you look up her quotations? Then there is Dorothy L Sayers. Have you heard of Dorothy L Sayers? Yes, Suman, I will do that. Tomorrow I will do morning shift. Dorothy L Sayers is an English writer. She wrote crime fiction and poetry. She was also a student of languages. She is best known for her mystery novels set between the First and Second World Wars. She wrote a number of mystery novels. Will you remember, guys? And she was a very humanist kind of writer. She was not a feminist or anything. Gaudy Night is important. Gaudy Night. Mystery novel. And she created a character, Lord Peter Wimsey. A number of novels are there based on Lord Peter Wimsey. This Gaudy Night is one of her Lord Peter Wimsey books. Okay, guys? Guys, I am reminding you, all these authors I am talking about are taken from net previous questions. All these novels are from net previous questions. Okay, don't take it lightly. All these authors are important. They will again ask something related to it. She has translated Dante's Divine Comedy. Dante's Divine Comedy she translated. And Nine Tailors is a mystery novel that is regarded as her best novel. Nine Tailors. Nine Tailors. And she also wrote books on Lord Peter Wimsey. That is the detective she created. She created the detective Lord Peter Wimsey. Alright. Then Kamila Paglia. Kamila Paglia is an American feminist academic and social critic. Kamila Paglia. She wrote essay collections. Both these have come in NET exam. Vamps and Tramps and Provocations. Kamila Paglia is an American feminist. Remember, Kamila Paglia is a feminist, American feminist, social critic. Important. Her books, both these books they have asked about in NET. She is famous for Sexual Personae, Art and Decadence from Nefertiti to Emily Dickinson. Sexual Personae, that is her famous book. Okay, if they asked one book or two books, both these they have asked, then they can ask more. Remember? So, Sexual Personae, Vamps and Tramps, then Provocations. So many books are there. Look up Kamila Paglia. Okay. She talked about various aspects of American culture, such as visual art, music, film history. She was also a post-structuralist. She is also a post-structuralist. Okay. Very good. Then, Nikos Kazantzakis. Nikos Kazantzakis is a Greek novelist. His famous book is Zorba the Greek, prescribed in many universities. Kazantzakis wrote a very controversial novel, The Last Temptation of Christ. He wrote many novels about Christ. Christ crucified, The Last Temptation of Christ. Zorba the Greek is very famous. He has also translated many Greek works like Divine Comedy, Thus Spake Zarathustra, Iliad and Odyssey. All that he translated. Zorba the Greek is his famous novel prescribed in universities. Zorba the Greek is about a young Greek intellectual who ventures to escape his bookish life with the aid of a boisterous, mysterious man called Alexei Zorba. You know, because of the influence of Alexei Zorba, he is escaping his dull, bookish life. That is Zorba the Greek. Very famous book. Will you remember, guys? Guys, I am talking about the major books prescribed in various universities. Okay, found in NET exams, previous NET exam question papers. And also remember, these are also prescribed in various universities. These books are famous, very important. They are from universities. In Kerala University, Zorba the Greek was prescribed, as well as many other universities. Okay, Donald, Barthelme, like that. Many books that I discussed today are from university syllabi as well as from NET previous question paper. Christ, yes. I told you that already. He wrote very important books like The Last Temptation of Christ, Christ Re-Crucified, and many travel books. The Saviors of God, another book. The Saviors of God. These are very controversial books. Not only famous but controversial. Last Temptation of Christ is very controversial. You know, because he depicts Christ as a human being with human failings, with various forms of temptation. Jesus Christ is struggling. That is, on the cross, he is seeing a vision of himself living happily with Mary. And that angered the Orthodox Christians. That is why it became very controversial. Remember everyone? Next. Indira Ganesan. Have you heard of Indira Ganesan? An important novelist. Many of them got awards. That is why they are being asked about. They got awards. Some of them got some of the writers we are talking about were shortlisted for Booker or they won Booker, etc. Indira Ganesan is an Indian American writer, author of novels like The Journey, Inheritance, and As Sweet as Honey. The Journey, Inheritance, and As Sweet as Honey. Will you remember, guys? Inheritance they asked about in net. In net they asked about inheritance. Inheritance is a story of 15-year-old Sonil. She has come to her grandmother's house on a small island in India. She has a very shaky health and she has come to India to regain her health. However, secretly she longs to find out why her mysteriously distant mother agreed to have her sent away as a child. Why her mother didn't want her with her. She wants to find out that also. That is the story of inheritance. Alright guys, this is very famous book by Indira Ganesan, author of The Journey and As Sweet as Honey. Have you heard of Indira Ganesan? You must have heard of Indira Goswami, Assamese writer, the moth-eaten howdah of the tusker. Indira Goswami you must have heard about. Indira Ganesan is a professor in I think, or she is just living there. And she has won a lot of fellowships. And she was published by Penguin. That is important. Alright. She has so many fellowships. That is what I see everywhere. Okay. Next writer we have here is Anjana Pachana. They have asked about Anjana Pachana also in net. Anjana Pachana is very famous. More than Indira Ganesan, she is famous. Anjana Pachana is an Indian American writer who wrote Listening Now. Anjana Pachana wrote Listening Now, a novel that unfolds through the intensely personal worlds of 7 characters. She has written Listening Now about 7 characters. She is also the author of Incantations and Other Stories. Incantations and Other Stories. Have you heard of that? That is her first work and kind of famous. Her short story called Sharmaji is included in Mirror Work. I should write that because देखो, her short story Sharmaji is included in Mirror Work. Do you know who edited Mirror Work? Mirror Work, 50 years of Indian writing. They will ask such questions, such books. 50 years of Indian writing. Edited by Salman Rushdie and Elizabeth West. That was his wife, for some time. Salman Rushdie and Elizabeth West wrote Mirror Work, 50 years of Indian writing. And Anjana Pachana has also written Listening Now, published by Random House. Very famous. Now, Anitarao Badami. Anitarao Badami is an Indo-Canadian writer. Her debut novel Tamarind Mame they have already asked about. Tamarind Mame is her debut novel. And It is from 1996. The Hero's Walk. Recently they asked about in net. The Hero's Walk. 2000. In a small dusty town in India, Shripati Rao struggles as a copywriter to keep his family afloat in their crumbling ancestral home. That is the story of Anitarao Badami's The Hero's Walk. She has also written Tamarind Mame. You're getting me, guys? Indo-Canadian writer. Okay, then. Do you want to know any other works by Anitarao Badami? These are two famous works. Let me tell you if there are more. Can you hear the night bird call? Can you hear the night bird call? That is from 2006. Okay, 2006. 2011 का भी है एक Tell It to the Trees. (2011). If they ask you one book, remember guys, if they ask you one book, they can ask you more than one other books also. Okay, very, very important. Teju Cole. Have you heard of that author? Teju Cole. Teju Cole, Nigerian American writer. Open City. They asked about Open City in net. Open City by Teju Cole, Nigerian American writer. Set in New York City and concerns a Nigerian immigrant, Julius, who has recently broken up with his girlfriend. Teju Cole, Nigerian American writer. So, when you study American literature, I think these days it is very important to look up these recent writers in American literature who are winning awards, etc. That is what they are asking. They are asking recent writers. Are you getting me, guys? So let us look up such writers. Is this helping you, this session? You are getting to know a lot of new names that they have asked in net already. Alain Mabanchko. Alain Mabanchko is a French citizen born in Republic of Congo. He is a French citizen born in Republic of Congo. He wrote a very famous novel, African Psycho. American Psycho, you know, na? This is African Psycho. First novel translated and published in English. Gregoire Nakobomayo is a petty criminal who decides to kill his girlfriend. He is planning to kill his girlfriend, a petty criminal. But he needs to prepare for it. This is the story of Alain Mabanchko's African Psycho. African Psycho, they have already asked about in net. So recent writers who have won awards, very, very important. Before the net exam, next net exam, please look up recent writers who have won awards. I did not cook up these names. I did not bring them from anywhere. I brought them from net and set papers. They are asking about these authors because in central universities they are prescribed. They want you to be up to date in knowledge. Getting me? All going well, guys? Are you loving this? Say something to me. Are you tired? American Psycho. Who wrote American Psycho, bolo? Only the other day I talked about American Psycho in Unacademy. In another session I talked about American Psycho. Bolo? Who wrote American Psycho? It is a famous film series, of course. Who wrote the novel American Psycho? Bret Easton Ellis. American Psycho is by Bret Easton Ellis. Serial killer and banker. Movies देखे होंगे. Jagrati, studying. You know, the problem is with your definition of studying. Studying does not mean memorizing something that you find in a book. Along with memorizing from books, you should always read extra, do your own research. Always. From whatever I give you, all those points are like 70%. But the rest is on your research. The problem is people are not easily passing net because you are thinking of mugging up from books only. Somehow if you mug up books, you will pass your thinking. And the clever university professors who make the question papers, they will put questions in such a way that only if you read extra, if you do your own research-oriented studying, then only you will pass. Did you understand? I will give you a foundation. My materials and classes are the highway, but you have to drive your car. You understand? I cannot drive your car. Each and every one of you has to individually drive your cars along my highway. Without my highway, it will be difficult. My highway will take you to the right destination in the easiest manner. But car is in your hands and driving is what you should do. If you are a bad driver, I can't help it. Clear? Be a good driver and use my highway properly. I have replied to your question the literary way, using analogy, allegory, etc. Did you like that? Okay. Helen Habila. Helen Habila. There are many coaching center people who are saying, you don't have to study a lot, you just have to, follow these things, in 10 days you can pass net. बिल्कुल गलत है. ऐसा नहीं होता. Because they are asking from so many areas in such a way that people who only mug up will not pass. So that is why net is looking so difficult. But the moment you read on your own, research, happily you study, then it will look like net is easy. Not that difficult. Because so many things are there in our material itself. But read on your own. Helen Habila is a Nigerian novelist and poet. So many poets and writers from Africa they are asking about. Not only the traditional ones, traditional questions are there. From all the traditional authors also they ask. But apart from that, there are so many new authors also they are asking about. Samajh rahe ho? Helen Habila, Nigerian novelist and poet. He wrote a non-fiction social novel called Chibok Girls. He wrote a non-fiction social novel called Chibok Girls. Will you remember? Subtitle is The Boko Haram Kidnappings and Islamic Militancy in Nigeria. The Boko Haram Kidnappings and Islamic Militancy in Nigeria. That is the subtitle. What is Boko Haram? Boko Haram is the terrorist group in Nigeria. Boko Haram is the terrorist group in Nigeria. Written due to 2014 kidnapping of some 276 Chibok girls. My God, 276 Chibok girls were kidnapped by the Boko Haram people. Did you understand such haramis? Hai na? They kidnapped nearly 300 people. And you know what happened? They were an Islamic terrorist group. There was a big problem in Nigeria at this time. And based on this, Helen Habila has written The Chibok Girls. Okay? Now, I want to ask you a few questions to check whether you remember. Before I move on, there are many more authors. Some more authors. Before I move on, I want to ask you something. Okay, are you ready? Who wrote The Naive and Sentimental Novelist? Bolo. Who wrote The Naive and Sentimental Novelist? That is wonderful, Raman. Helen Habila. Who is the author of The Naive and Sentimental Novelist? It is Orhan Pamuk. Orhan Pamuk. Which is the non-fiction work by Jamaica Kincaid that we talked about? The non-fiction work by Jamaica Kincaid that we talked about? It is A Small Place. A Small Place. Tell me, who wrote Testaments Betrayed? About the history of the development of novel. Testaments Betrayed. He also wrote The Book of Laughter and Forgetting. The Unbearable Lightness of Being. It is Milan Kundera. Milan Kundera. Now tell me, Snow White, Batman. These are short stories by Snow White, Batman, short stories by. Yaad hai? He wrote short fiction, flash fiction. It is Donald Barthelme. Donald Barthelme. Who wrote New York Trilogy? City of Glass, Ghosts, The Locked Room, New York Trilogy. Book of Illusions also he wrote. It is Paul Oster. Paul Oster. Ye bolo, who wrote Alexander Trilogy? Alexander Trilogy. Mary Renault. Mary Renault. Remember? Who is the famous diarist we talked about? Famous diarist. Anais Nin. Anais Nin. Henna. Who wrote Colonial Transactions about English literature and the British and India? Harish Trivedi. Harish Trivedi. ठीक है? And last question to you. Who is the Indo-American writer who wrote Inheritance? Indo-American writer who wrote Inheritance, bolo. Indo-American writer who wrote Inheritance is Indira Ganesan. Anjana Pachana wrote Listening Now. Listening Now. Anitarao Badami wrote The Hero's Walk. Will you remember all this? Anitarao Badami, Hero's Walk. Anjana Pachana, Listening Now. Now, shall I move on? Helen Habila wrote The Chibok Girls. Next, Marlon James. Marlon James is very famous because he became the first Jamaican writer to win the Booker. A Brief History of 7 Killings in 2014. Remember this? A Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James. It spans several decades and explores the attempted assassination of Bob Marley in Jamaica. Bob Marley was going to be killed in Jamaica. He is writing about it in A Brief History of 7 Killings. And he talks about the crack wars in New York City and a changed Jamaica of the 1990s. This was very famous at that time, 2014. Do you remember? Then the book, I will just bold it. The Book of Night Women, another book by Marlon James, follows the story of Lilith, a young woman born into slavery who challenges the boundaries of what is expected of her. Lilith is a young woman born into slavery, and she is a slave, but she is rebelling, she is rejecting the boundaries of her slavery, her life as a slave. Did you understand, guys? A Brief History of 7 Killings is about Bob Marley's killings. Hannah? Marlon James created history with Booker. With his Booker Prize, he created history. He lives in the US, okay? He lives in the US. Black Leopard and Red Wolf also he wrote. Black Leopard and Red Wolf. Oh, his first book, John Crow's Devil, was rejected 70 times before its publication. 70 times. And it was the first book by a Jamaican author to be shortlisted. Brief History of 7 Killings. First book by a Jamaican author. Will you remember? Very, very important writer. He teaches English and creative writing. Did you know that? He teaches English and creative writing. He won Booker in 2015. Okay? His Booker came in 2015. Did you like, has anybody here read Marlon James? You should try to read Marlon James. Okay? Now, are you ready for the next writer? Hello, Sneha. Colson Whitehead. Colson Whitehead. Colson Whitehead is an American novelist. Recently in my Instagram, I had made a Instagram book on Colson Whitehead. You know, with 5-6 pages. Colson Whitehead is an American novelist. And he is well known for the Underground Railroad. So there are so many black writers writing recently. Colson Whitehead is one of them. Hannah? And he has written the Underground Railroad. Did you watch it in Netflix or something? It's a web series. Did you know that? And he got Pulitzer again for The Nickel Boys. Author of, he got Underground Railroad got Pulitzer. The Nickel Boys also is by Colson Whitehead. The Nickel Boys came in 2020 only. Now, The Underground Railroad is a historical fiction novel. It won Pulitzer. It's an alternate history novel. Guys, I am telling you about books and authors that they have asked in previous question papers of NET and SET. Okay? Right. Underground Railroad is an alternate history novel. It tells the story of Cora Caesar. Cora and Caesar, two slaves in the antebellum South. Do you know what is antebellum South? Antebellum means before the Civil War. Antebellum in America means before the Civil War. They are two slaves from antebellum South during the 19th century. They make a bid for freedom. They are going to freedom from their Georgia plantation by following the Underground Railroad. There is an Underground Railroad. Two slaves before the Civil War. They are traveling through the Underground Railroad and going to their freedom. You know what I am reminded of? I am reminded of 3 Australian Aboriginal girls traveling along the electrified fence, rabbit-proof fence. Who wrote it? Follow the rabbit-proof fence. Who wrote it? Follow the Rabbit Proof Fence is by Doris Pilkington Garimara. Doris Pilkington Garimara. Will you remember? The Underground Railroad is by Colson Whitehead. An alternate history novel it is. Before the Civil War it is set. Will you remember? Nickel Boys and Underground Railroad both won Pulitzer Prize. Got all the points correct? American writer. Next writer is British writer. That is John Banville. John Banville wrote The Sea. John Banville wrote The Sea. Who wrote The Sea, The Sea? The Sea, The Sea. The Sea, The Sea is by Iris Murdoch. John Banville wrote The Sea. Alright. It won Booker Prize, of course. 2005 novel that won Booker Prize. It is a novel about memory. A middle-aged man is remembering his past. That is the story in John Banville's The Sea. Max Morden. He is a self-aware, retired art historian attempting to reconcile himself to the deaths of those he loved as a child, as an adult. He is remembering loved ones who died. He also wrote Freddie Montgomery Trilogy. Freddie Montgomery Trilogy. Doris Pilkington novel is Follow the Rabbit Proof Fence. Follow the Rabbit Proof Fence. Follow the Rabbit Proof Fence is by Doris Pilkington Garimara. Listen everybody, John Banville's The Sea. Then Freddie Montgomery Trilogy. All these they have already asked about in net. The Book of Evidence and Goes Athena, they have already asked about it in net. Okay? They have already asked about it in net. Now, Freddie Montgomery is the character who is appearing in these novels. The Book of Evidence, Ghosts and Athena. Got it, guys? Next, K.S. Maniam. Wow, this is a Malaysian writer they have asked about in net. K.S. Maniam is a Malaysian writer. K.S. Maniam is the author of The Return, a Bildungsroman. The Return. In a Far Country. The novel revolves around the notes, letters, meditations and memoirs of Rajan, a successful but disillusioned middle-aged businessman. K.S. Maniam wrote The Return, In a Far Country, Between Lives. Will you remember, guys? A Return is a Bildungsroman. Then, In a Far Country, is a novel about the notes, letters, meditations and memories of Rajan, a successful but disillusioned businessman, middle-aged businessman. Between the Lives is set in a Malaysian city, but in the middle of the city is a magnificent forest. Now it is a real estate and theme park. The forest in the middle of the city is a real estate and theme park. That is the setting of Between Lives. The return in a far country between lives. Bernardine Evaristo. Who is Bernardine Evaristo? She won Booker Prize along with Margaret Atwood. Margaret Atwood wrote The Testaments. Margaret Atwood wrote The Testaments. She is a writer. Bernardine Evaristo is also a British writer who won the Booker along with The Testaments. Girl, Woman, Other. That is her most important book. She is also a professor. The novel follows the lives of 12 characters in the United Kingdom over the course of several decades. Bernardine Evaristo is a black British author and academic who won the Booker. The novel follows the lives of 12 characters in the United Kingdom. Will you remember, guys? It is a narrator novel. Now, The Testaments, as you remember, is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. The Testaments is the sequel to Handmaid's Tale. Next writer we have here is J.G. Ballard. British novelist, short story writer, satirist and essayist. Guys, I am telling you about major writers that we don't know. They are all from previous net and set question papers. If they ask about these writers once or twice, then it means again they will ask. Again they will ask. Did you understand? British novelist, short story writer, satirist and essayist he is. And The Drowned World is a very important book. It is about climate change and global warming. Did you know that? Cli-fi fiction. Cli-fi fiction. And Drowned World shows a post-apocalyptic future in which global warming has caused the majority of the earth to become uninhabitable. It is a post-apocalyptic novel. The Drowned World shows because of global warming, ice has melted and much of the world has become uninhabitable. Did you understand? And it is Cli-fi fiction. Cli-fi is a very important genre. Cli-fi means climate fiction. Cli-fi means climate fiction. Okay? Solar by Ian McEwan is Cli-fi. People are doing research in Cli-fi these days. Solar novel by Ian McEwan is also Cli-fi. Which is the non-fiction work by Amitav Ghosh about climate change? Which is the non-fiction work? Wikipedia is, Encyclopedia Britannica. Various websites you should use. Not only Wikipedia. Ye bolo, which is the non-fiction work by Amitav Ghosh about climate change? The Great Derangement. The Great Derangement. Okay? Right. So I am talking about very important authors and works that they have asked in recent net and set question papers. Very important therefore. Recent net and set question papers, you get these authors questions. That means again they will ask. If anybody has to write another time, please study all these writers in case they ask again. Okay? Then, Empire of the Sun is also by J.G. Ballard. It is a story of a boy, Jamie Graham. A boy, Jamie Graham's story based on J.G. Ballard's own experience as he grew up in Shanghai during Japanese occupation. He is J.G. Ballard. He grew up in Shanghai during Japanese occupation of China. At that time, his own experiences are written in Empire of the Sun. Crash is a novel about symphorophilia. Symphorophilia means car crash fetishism. Car crash fetishism or symphorophilia. Will you remember, guys? Now, the next writer is Julian Barnes, British novelist. Julian Barnes wrote The Sense of an Ending, which won Booker. The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes won Booker Prize. I'm talking about authors who were asked recently in Net and Set, but understand they are all either Nobel Prize winners, Pulitzer Prize winners, or people shortlisted for Pulitzer Prize. So these names we should seriously study, because in the coming exam they will ask somewhere from these writers. The Sense of an Ending is about a middle-aged business owner. He lives a quiet life in London, reunites with his first love after his mother unexpectedly receives a letter from his ex-girlfriend from school, which forces him to confront the past. His ex-girlfriend from school writes his mother a letter. That is a story of The Sense of an Ending. And he's thinking about the past, memory. That is the theme of The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes. Other books by Julian Barnes are very important. Many important books are there by Julian Barnes. Tell me, guys, what are the important books by Julian Barnes? Important books by Julian Barnes. The Only Story, shall I write here for your benefit? The Only Story. The Noise of Time. They might ask such questions. Very famous is Flaubert's Parrot. Then England. Arthur and George. They are all books by Julian Barnes. Author of The Only Story, The Noise of Time, Flaubert's Parrot, England, Arthur and George. And Julian Barnes has also written crime fiction under the name Dan Kavanagh. Dan Kavanagh. Okay, guys? Then, he was shortlisted for Booker several times. England is a theme park. Flaubert's Parrot is about a man who is searching for the stuffed parrot that inspired Flaubert. Got it, guys? Now, shall we do the next author? Did you like this session? I hope it is benefiting you. Next, David Diop. Look at me, guys. There are two David Diops, okay? There are two David Diops. One David Diop wrote Africa. The famous poem Africa. This David Diop is a French novelist academic who lived later. And this David Diop writes in French, at night all blood is black. It won International Booker Prize. That's another prize. International Booker Prize. At night all blood is black. 2-foot soldiers fighting in World War I are the protagonists. 2-foot soldiers fighting in World War I. They are the protagonists. What did the other David Diop write? The other David Diop wrote Africa the poem. Africa the poem was by David Diop. This David Diop is a novelist. That David Diop was part of Negritude movement. The other David Diop was part of Negritude movement. Will you remember, guys? Leopold Sedar Senghor, Amy Césaire, Leon Damas and David Diop. Important Negritude writers. This is a famous novel now because it won International Booker Prize. Abdul Razak Gurnah. He's a professor at the University of Kent. Tanzanian-born novelist, academic who lives in the United Kingdom. Tanzanian-born novelist and academic. Winner of Nobel Prize in 2021. Just a few months ago we heard about it, Hena? Abdul Razak Gurnah. They have already asked about Abdul Razak Gurnah. Important novels are Paradise, Admiring Silence, Desertion and Afterlife. Guys, many of Abdul Razak Gurnah's novels are historical novels. What is Paradise about? Paradise is an African boy's coming of age. An African boy is coming of age. It is a tragic love story. A tale of the corruption of traditional African patterns by Europeans. Okay? African boy's coming of age story, Paradise, 1994. Admiring Silence. A man escapes from his native Zanzibar to come to England, builds a new life with an English woman, and he tells stories of post-colonial Africa. Then Desertion and Afterlives. Both are historical novels by Abdul Razak Gurnah. He's an academic. He taught at the University of Kent. Yes, guys, 2021 Nobel Prize, as I have said here. Will you remember? Very important. They will ask, okay? Abdul Razak Gurnah. Tanzanian-born novelist. Okay? I am talking about authors and works that have been asked in recent years in net. Okay? Damon Galgut. Damon Galgut. Net and set both. Damon Galgut is a South African novelist and playwright. The author of The Promise. Won Booker Prize in 2021. Nobel and Booker both. Damon Galgut wrote The Promise. A novel that follows a white South African family called the Swarts. A white South African family called the Swarts you find here in this novel. Living on a farm outside Pretoria. Damon Galgut's Promise. He's a South African novelist. We see the Swarts living on a farm outside Pretoria. Will you remember? Pretoria. That is where he also lived. Damon Galgut also lived. There are autobiographical connections. Douglas Stewart. In Instagram, I had made a series on Douglas Stewart also. Douglas Stewart is Scottish-American writer and fashion designer also. Douglas Stewart is a fashion designer and writer. His Shuggie Bain is famous and it is autobiographical. Also Booker winner. He tells the story of Shuggie, the youngest of 3 children. He is growing up with his alcoholic mother Agnes. In Shuggie Bain, the boy Shuggie is growing up with his alcoholic mother Agnes. This was actually based on Douglas Stewart's own life. Douglas Stewart's own life is the basis for this. In Glasgow, working class Glasgow, a poor boy growing up with his alcoholic mother. That is the story of Douglas Stewart's Shuggie Bain. Very famous. My Insta name is Dr. Kalyani Vallath. Shuggie Bain, very famous because it won Booker Prize 2020. Will you remember? Dr. Kalyani Vallath or Kalyani Vallath? Either of those. Now, Mark Haddon. Have you heard of Mark Haddon? Very famous global bestseller he wrote. Global bestseller. It's a mystery novel based on a 15-year-old autistic boy, The Curious Case of the Dog in the Night Time. It's a young adult novel, autistic novel, famous novel. Mark Haddon wrote The Curious Case of the Dog in the Night Time. Then, David Mitchell, another important writer. 2 books of David Mitchell they have asked in net. The Bone Clocks, Cloud Atlas. 2 books they have asked about. The Bone Clocks is a novel that won the Fantasy Award, World Fantasy Award. Oh, so it is fantasy. It is fantasy. The World Fantasy Award it won. Divided into 6 sections with first person point of view of 5 narrators. Bone Clocks, fantasy novel. Cloud Atlas, dekho 6 individuals. All his novels have multiple people. Multiple personalities. Bone Clocks, Cloud Atlas. Okay? 6 individuals belonging to different generations go on an emotional ride while exploring how human actions impact the lives of their loved ones. How our actions change the life of their loved ones. That is the theme of Cloud Atlas. Who wrote Cloud 9 bolo? Cloud 9. Cloud 9 is Carol Churchill. Cloud 9 is Carol Churchill. Okay, Janet Winterson. All of you might know, na? Janet Winterson is the author of Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. A semi-autobiographical novel about a sensitive teenage girl rebelling against convention. Janet Winterson wrote Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, which is about a teenage girl discovering that she is lesbian, but her mother is very angry with her. Why Be Happy? The other next book that she wrote is famous. What is it? Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal? It is a memoir, sequel to Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. Janet Winterson, apart from this, has written many books. Many books are there. Sexing the Cherry. I will write important books, okay? So that you will remember. Author of Sexing the Cherry. Important book it is, you should know. 1989. Sexing the Cherry. Gut Symmetries. They are asking all sort of books though. Gut Symmetries. 1997. Lighthouse Keeping. 2004. Will you remember, guys? The Stone Gods. 2007. Yes. Already in one class I have talked about why be happy when you could be normal. Remember, guys? Now, Douglas Adams. Douglas Adams is looking like this and asking, did you like the session, guys? He is the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's a comedy science fiction novel series. Comedy science fiction novel series. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is the story of 2 human beings who survive the Earth's senseless destruction. The 2 human beings are surviving the Earth's senseless destruction, and their adventures in space and time while attempting to discover the meaning of life. That is the theme of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Did you understand? Very famous book. Science fiction. So that brings us to the end of this session. We have talked about a lot of very important authors who have been, the questions about them have been asked in net and set. I am sure that Some of these authors will come in the next exam also. Study, okay? And similarly, look up all the award winners, people who are shortlisted. You know why? Because NET exam is passed by those who are up to date in their subject and discipline. It is not enough to know some syllabi. You should be up to date in your industry, in your discipline. Did you understand? That is why. Okay? Thank you for joining me. Please revise all these writers and all blessings to you. Tomorrow I will do a session on what is it called? The analysis of the question paper. And also I will 8 p.m. in Unacademy I will do theoretical terms. Did you understand, guys? Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.